Sebastian Hale's laughter cut through the ballroom's stunned silence. His phone already recording, as Arya knelt among glass shards and vintage wine pooling around her server's uniform.
"Did everyone see that?"
Sebastian announced, panning his camera across tables draped in ivory silk.
"This is what happens when the help forgets their place." The Montclair Pearl Hotel's crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across faces frozen between horror and entertainment. Arya's fingers trembled as she reached for broken glass, her reflection fractured in 1,000 pieces across the polished floor. Then the ballroom doors opened, and everything changed. Before we dive into what happened next, hit that subscribe button because this story takes twists you won't see coming, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever witnessed someone get instant karma. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. 4 hours earlier, Arya had tied her hair into a practical bun, checking her reflection in Safe Nest Collective's bathroom mirror. The nonprofit's flickering fluorescent lights made everyone look exhausted, but Arya had earned her shadows honestly through 70-hour work weeks, split between 3 jobs and night classes at Metropolitan Community College. "You're doing the Montclair Gala tonight?" Monica Grant appeared behind her, Safe Nest's founder and the closest thing to a mentor Arya had found in this city that chewed up dreamers and spit out cynics. Need the money. Arya adjusted her server's uniform, borrowed from another catering company after her regular employer mysteriously canceled 3 of her shifts this week. Mia's prescription costs went up again. Monica's expression softened with the particular sympathy reserved for young women raising siblings alone. "How is your sister?" "Stable, happy, expensive." Arya smiled because the alternative was crying, and she'd already allocated her monthly crying time to last Tuesday's nervous breakdown in the grocery store parking lot. The new medication's working, but insurance categorizes it as experimental, which apparently means I should consider donating organs for cash. "The gala crowd will tip well," Monica offered, though both women knew that people who spent $5,000 per plate rarely notice the hands that served them. Arya checked her phone, anxiety spiking at an email notification. Another rejection from the journalism program at Northwestern. Her 12th this application cycle, each one a small death of the future she'd imagined before her parents died and transformed her from college freshman to legal guardian overnight. "I should go," Arya said, shoving the phone into her bag alongside student loan statements she couldn't bear to open. Can't be late for people who think tardiness is a moral failing but wage theft is just business. The Montclair Pearl Hotel rose 43 stories above the city's financial district, all glass and steel in the kind of architectural arrogance that announced wealth in capital letters. Arya entered through the service entrance where reality lived, past industrial kitchens and staff changing rooms that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperate ambition. "You're on ballroom duty," the catering manager informed her, barely glancing up from his tablet. "Senator's charity thing. High profile, high stress, high expectations. Smile, stay invisible, and for God's sake, don't engage with the guests." Arya had perfected invisibility years ago. It was a survival skill in a world that treated service workers like furniture with pulses, present but not quite human enough to warrant eye contact or basic courtesy. The ballroom took her breath away, despite her determination to remain unimpressed. Chandeliers dripped crystal tears above tables, set with china so delicate it seemed to exist as a middle finger to practicality. Ice sculptures melted slowly into themselves, creating puddles that someone else would clean. Flower arrangements cost more than Arya's monthly rent, their beauty temporary and extravagant and utterly divorced from the reality of budgeting groceries. "Champagne, miss?" Arya offered her tray to a woman draped in diamonds and dismissal. The woman took a glass without acknowledging Arya's existence, continuing her conversation about summer homes in the Hamptons and the exhausting difficulty of finding reliable help. Arya circulated through clusters of wealth,
catching fragments of conversation that painted pictures of lives she couldn't fathom. A man complained about his yacht's crew being insufficiently multilingual. A woman debated whether Bali or the Maldives offered better spiritual enlightenment for influencer content. Someone discussed their child's admission to an elite preschool that cost more than Arya's annual tuition. "They breed entitlement into these kids," a voice said near the bar. "Not quite quiet enough. Give them everything, then wonder why they think the world revolves around their mediocrity." Arya glanced toward the speaker, a silver-haired man with the weathered competence of someone who'd built rather than inherited his fortune. He caught her eye and offered a slight nod, the first genuine acknowledgement she'd received all evening. Then, Sebastian Hale entered, and the room's energy shifted. He moved through the ballroom like royalty touring conquered territory, trailed by friends who laughed at jokes that weren't funny and agreed with opinions that weren't informed. Sebastian was 26, but carried himself with the unearned confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. His suit tailored to emphasize shoulders broadened by personal trainers rather than actual labor. "Sweetheart." He snapped his fingers at Arya without looking at her face. "More champagne. The good stuff, not whatever swill you're pushing." Arya's jaw tightened, but she maintained her professional mask. "Of course, sir." "Sir." Sebastian mimicked her voice with cruel accuracy, earning laughs from his entourage. "Did you hear that?" "She called me sir. Like we're in some Victorian novel, and she's the scullery maid." "You're drunk, Sebastian," one of his friends observed, though without any real concern. "I'm celebrating." Sebastian grabbed a glass from Arya's tray with enough force to slosh champagne over the rim. "Father finally admitted I'm essential to Hale Industries. Only took 26 years and a trust fund larger than his ego." Arya moved to leave, but Sebastian's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with casual cruelty. "Where are you going?" "We're having a conversation." "I have other guests to serve, sir." "Sa!" Sebastian repeated again, delighted by his own mockery. "Marcus, are you filming this?" "This is gold. The perpetually oppressed service class in their natural habitat." The friend named Marcus raised his phone, camera pointed directly at Arya's face. She turned away, but Sebastian yanked her wrist, spinning her back toward the lens. "Don't be shy," Sebastian cooed with toxic sweetness. "Smile for the camera. Maybe you'll go viral. Isn't that what you people dream about? Your 15 minutes? Please let go of my wrist." Arya kept her voice level despite the rage building behind her ribs like a trapped animal. "Please," Sebastian mimicked again. "She says please. How quaint, how refreshingly deferential." He released her wrist only to pluck another glass from her tray with theatrical flourish. "Tell me, sweetheart, what's your sad story? Single mother? Drug-addicted boyfriend? Student loans for a degree in something useless like anthropology?" The ballroom had gone quiet, conversations dying as people sensed entertainment in the making. Arya felt their attention like physical pressure. Hundreds of eyes watching her humiliation crystallize into content for tomorrow's gossip. "I need to get back to work," Arya said, proud of how steady her voice remained. "Work," Sebastian laughed. "Is that what you call walking around with overpriced alcohol? I call it loitering with purpose." He raised his glass in mock toast. "To the working class, whose primary contribution to society is making the rest of us feel better about our success." "That's enough, Sebastian." The silver-haired man from earlier stepped forward, his expression carved from granite. "You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself?" Sebastian's eyes flashed with the particular rage of entitled men confronting boundaries. "I'm not the one serving drinks for minimum wage and pretending it's dignified." He turned back to Arya, and something in his expression shifted from cruel amusement to active malice. Later, Arya would replay this moment endlessly, trying to pinpoint exactly when Sebastian decided that mockery wasn't enough, that he needed to create a scene memorable enough to justify his father's low opinion. Sebastian raised his wine glass, a 1996 Chateau Margaux that cost $800 per bottle, and deliberately poured it down Arya's uniform. The red wine cascaded over her shoulders, soaking through white fabric and turning it transparent. It dripped down her arms, pooled in her shoes, and transformed her into a spectacle for 200 people who'd paid $5,000 for dinner and a show. Marcus's phone captured every second. Other phones emerged from purses and pockets. A digital firing squad documenting Aria's degradation from multiple angles. "Oops," Sebastian said, his smile wide and utterly empty. "How clumsy of me. Better clean that up before it stains the marble. Wouldn't want to damage property that actually matters." The ballroom remained silent, shock or complicity freezing everyone in place. The catering manager appeared at Aria's elbow, his face pale with the recognition of lawsuits and lost contracts. "I'm so sorry, mister," he gushed, ignoring Arya entirely. "We'll handle this immediately. Please accept our sincerest—" "Make her clean it up," Sebastian interrupted, his phone now recording alongside Marcus's. "On her knees. I want to see some genuine remorse for ruining my evening." Arya looked at the wine pooling on marble flooring that cost more per square foot than her monthly salary. She looked at Sebastian's face, flushed with alcohol and power and the absolute certainty that he would face no consequences. She looked at 200 people who could intervene but wouldn't, their silence as damning as Sebastian's cruelty. And she knelt. Not because Sebastian deserved her compliance, but because her sister needed medications, and Arya needed this job, and the world didn't care about fairness or dignity when you were drowning in debt with no safety net. Her knees hit marble hard enough to bruise. Wine soaked through her stockings, cold and sticky and humiliating. She reached for glass shards with shaking hands, each piece a fragment of her pride shattered across imported flooring. Sebastian's laughter echoed off vaulted ceilings. "Perfect. This is perfect. Marcus, make sure you get her face. I want to remember this moment." Aria's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She would not give him that satisfaction. She would clean up his mess and cash her paycheck and go home to Mia and pretend that human cruelty hadn't carved another piece from her soul. Then the ballroom doors opened. The sound cut through Sebastian's laughter like a blade through silk. Arya looked up from her position on the floor, wine-stained and broken, as silence spread through the room in concentric circles of suddenly uncomfortable awareness. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the corridor's soft lighting in a way that made him seem less arrived than materialized. He was tall, dark-haired, and carried himself with the kind of absolute stillness that preceded violence or poetry, depending on the situation. Luca Vitale surveyed the ballroom with eyes the color of winter storms, his gaze moving across the frozen tableau with methodical precision. He took in the phones recording Aria's humiliation, Sebastian's triumphant smirk, the wine spreading across marble like spilled blood. "I appear to have interrupted something," Luca said, his voice carrying effortlessly despite its quietness. "How unfortunate for everyone involved." Sebastian's smile faltered, recognition dawning with the slow horror of someone realizing they'd miscalculated badly. "Luca! I didn't know you were attending. Clearly." Luca crossed the ballroom with measured steps, his expensive shoes clicking against marble in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. "Please, don't stop on my account. You seem to be enjoying yourself so thoroughly." He stopped beside Arya, who remained frozen on her knees among wine and glass shards. Luca extended his hand to her, palm up, offering assistance with a formality that transformed the gesture into something closer to a challenge. "May I?" he asked, his attention entirely on Arya despite the 200 witnesses holding their collective breath. Arya took his hand because refusing seemed impossible under the weight of his focus. His grip was warm and steady as he helped her to her feet, his other hand briefly touching her elbow to ensure her balance. "Thank you," Arya whispered, unsure why this man's simple courtesy felt more overwhelming than Sebastian's cruelty. Luca studied her face with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "You're hurt. I'm fine. You're bleeding." He gestured to her palms, where glass shards had cut shallow lines across her skin. "And you're lying, though I appreciate the resilience." He removed his jacket, charcoal gray, and probably worth more than Arya's car, and draped it across her wine-soaked shoulders. The silk lining still held his body heat, wrapping her in warmth that felt almost aggressive in its kindness. "Sebastian." Luca turned toward the man who'd orchestrated this humiliation, his expression unchanged but somehow radiating threat like heat from asphalt in summer. "I believe you owe this woman an apology." Sebastian's face cycled through emotions too quickly to catalog, landing somewhere between defensive rage and genuine fear. "It was just a joke, Luca. Everyone's too sensitive these days. A joke." Luca's tone remained conversational, which somehow made his words more cutting. "How fascinating. I've always wondered about the psychology of cruelty disguised as humor. Tell me, does it stem from inadequacy? Or is it simpler than that? Just the casual sadism of someone who's never been held accountable. Now wait just a minute. I'm not finished." Luca's voice didn't rise, but Sebastian's mouth snapped shut like a puppet with cut strings. "You humiliated this woman for entertainment. You recorded her degradation for distribution. You forced her to kneel in front of an audience because you have the emotional maturity of a particularly vicious child." The ballroom remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed from shock to anticipation. People sensed a shift in power dynamics, the kind of reversal that would dominate social media and private conversations for weeks. "If arrogance were currency, sir, you'd finally be rich," Luca continued, and several people gasped at the casual destruction of Sebastian's ego. "Unfortunately, you've confused your father's money with personal value, which is a common delusion among men who've never built anything worth inheriting." Sebastian's face flushed crimson. "You can't talk to me like that. Do you know who my father is?" "I know exactly who your father is." Luca smiled without warmth. "I also know he's currently renegotiating several loans with institutions I control." Curious timing, don't you think? Almost like the universe enjoys irony. The implications landed like physical blows. Sebastian's expression shifted from rage to calculation to dawning horror as he realized the precariousness of his position. "Luca, please," Sebastian said, his earlier bravado evaporating. "I didn't mean anything by it. It was just cruelty for sport." Luca gestured toward Arya, who stood trembling in his jacket, watching this confrontation unfold with the disconnected fascination of someone in shock. "Apologize to her, now, and make it sincere, because I've become quite invested in her well-being in the last 3 minutes." Sebastian turned toward Arya, his jaw working like he was chewing glass. "I'm sorry." "Louder," Luca suggested. "Ensure everyone with a phone recording captures your remorse." "I'm sorry," Sebastian repeated, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way." Arya nodded, unsure how to respond to an apology extracted through intimidation rather than genuine remorse. "Okay." "Okay," Luca echoed, as if testing the word. He looked at Arya with an expression she couldn't decode, something between curiosity and concern, and an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "That seems insufficient,
but I suppose forced apologies rarely satisfy. He turned back to Sebastian, his smile sharp enough to cut. Delete the videos, all of them. And convince your friends to do the same, or I'll ensure your father's refinancing attempts encounter unexpected complications. Are we clear? Sebastian nodded rapidly, already gesturing to Marcus and the others. Phones disappeared into pockets, recordings deleted under Luca's watchful gaze. Excellent. Luca returned his attention to Arya, his expression softening into something almost gentle. I think you're done working tonight. Let me arrange transportation. I need this job, Arya protested, though her voice lacked conviction. You'll be compensated for the full evening. Luca glanced at the catering manager, who nodded frantically. Double rate, I think. Hazard pay for enduring the company of people who mistake wealth for worth. He offered Arya his arm with old-fashioned formality. Please allow me to ensure you get home safely. Call it penance for arriving too late to prevent this entirely. Arya looked at his extended arm, at his face that broadcast sincerity alongside danger, at the ballroom full of people who'd watched her humiliation, but were now watching her rescue with equal fascination. She took his arm because staying felt impossible and leaving alone felt unbearable. Luca guided her through the ballroom toward the main entrance rather than the service exit, transforming her departure into a statement. People parted before them, their earlier silence now charged with whispered speculation about who Luca Vitale was escorting and why Sebastian Hale looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Outside, winter air cut through Arya's wine-soaked uniform despite Luca's jacket. A black car materialized at the curb, driven by someone who'd clearly been waiting for Luca's signal. Where do you live? Luca asked, opening the passenger door. Arya rattled off her address in the city's struggling northeast quarter, where gentrification hadn't yet reached and probably never would. She expected judgment or surprise, but Luca simply relayed the information to his driver.
This really isn't necessary,
Arya said as the car pulled into traffic. I can take the bus. The bus, Luca repeated, his tone suggesting he'd never considered public transportation as a viable concept. At 11 p.m., while traumatized and bleeding. That seems inadvisable. I'm not traumatized. You're shaking. Arya looked down at her trembling hands, only now noticing the fine tremor running through her entire body. That's adrenaline. It'll pass. Perhaps. Luca studied her with the same intensity he'd shown in the ballroom, like she was a puzzle requiring careful analysis. What's your name? I realized I defended your honor without learning basic identifying information. Aria Chen, Luca Vitale. He extended his hand, and they shook formally despite the absurdity of the situation. His grip remained warm and steady, grounding her spiraling thoughts. I apologize for Sebastian's behavior. He's always been a mediocre human being, but tonight he exceeded even my low expectations. You know him well? Unfortunately, our fathers conduct business together occasionally, which means I'm forced to tolerate his presence at social functions. Luca's expression soured. Though after tonight, I think I'll recommend my father explore alternative partnerships. Call it a business decision with personal satisfaction. The car navigated through streets that grew progressively less polished, glass towers giving way to aging brownstones and corner stores with security gates. Arya watched the city transform outside her window, her neighborhood announcing itself through graffiti tags and potholed roads that the city never quite prioritized for repair. You can drop me at the corner, Arya said as they approached her building. I don't want to trouble you further. Seeing you safely inside isn't trouble. Luca waited for the car to stop before exiting and moving around to open Arya's door. Consider it completing the rescue properly. Half measures rarely satisfy. Arya climbed out,
hyper-aware of her wine-stained uniform and the way Luca's jacket draped over her shoulders like borrowed armor. "Thank you for everything."
"You didn't have to intervene. I didn't have to," Luca agreed. "But I wanted to. There's a distinction worth acknowledging."
He walked her to the building's entrance, where a broken intercom system had been promising repairs for 3 years. Arya punched in the door code, hyper-aware of Luca's presence beside her in the cramped vestibule that smelled like old cooking and someone's failed attempt at air freshener. "This is me," Arya said, unnecessarily, gesturing vaguely toward the stairs. "Then this is where I say goodnight." Luca paused, seemed to debate something internally, then pulled a business card from his wallet. "If Sebastian or anyone from tonight attempts retaliation, call me. Or if you simply need to talk to someone who understands that cruelty disguised as entertainment is still cruelty." Arya took the card, expensive cardstock embossed with a phone number and nothing else. "I don't understand why you're being so kind. Perhaps I'm not kind. Perhaps I'm selfish." Luca smiled, and for the first time, genuine warmth reached his eyes. "Perhaps I saw someone interesting having a terrible evening and decided intervening might lead somewhere unexpected." "Unexpected," Arya echoed. "That's one word for tonight. I prefer it to traumatic." Luca stepped back toward the door, maintaining eye contact in a way that made Arya's heart race for reasons entirely separate from earlier fear. "Good night, Aria Chen. I hope your tomorrow improves dramatically." He left before she could respond, disappearing into the night and his waiting car like something from a fairy tale, if fairy tales featured morally ambiguous men who threatened financial ruin with perfect courtesy. Arya climbed 4 flights to her apartment, her legs shaking from exhaustion and emotional overload. Inside, her sister Mia sat curled on their second-hand couch, chemistry textbook open across her knees. "You're home early," Mia observed, then registered Arya's appearance. "Oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? Is that wine? Why are you wearing a men's jacket that probably costs more than our rent?" Arya sank onto the couch beside her sister, suddenly overwhelmed by the evening's surreal progression from humiliation to rescue. "It's a really long story. I have time." Mia closed her textbook, giving Arya her full attention with the fierce protectiveness of younger siblings who'd grown up too fast. "Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." So Arya told her everything, from Sebastian's cruelty to Luca's intervention to the business card currently burning a hole in her pocket with its implications and possibilities. Mia listened without interruption, her expression cycling through rage at Sebastian and fascination with Luca, before landing on concern. "Be careful, Arya. Men who intervene that dramatically usually have complicated reasons."
I know.
Arya fingered Luca's business card, wondering if she'd ever be brave enough or stupid enough to actually call. "Trust me, I know." But 3 days later, when her regular catering company mysteriously fired her and 2 other job prospects suddenly withdrew their offers, Arya found herself dialing Luca's number with shaking fingers and mounting desperation. He answered on the second ring. "Arya, I was wondering if you'd call." "I need help," she admitted, pride dissolving in the face of practical necessity. "And I think you might know why," Sebastian's retaliating. It wasn't a question. I'd hoped he'd learned his lesson, but apparently public humiliation only breeds resentment rather than growth. "Tell me everything." Arya explained the lost jobs, the threatening emails from lawyers she couldn't afford to fight, the growing certainty that Sebastian Hale was systematically destroying her ability to earn a living because she'd witnessed his humiliation. "I'll handle it," Luca said with the absolute confidence of someone accustomed to rearranging reality through sheer force of will. "But I'd like to see you. Not for business purposes, Though we should discuss Sebastian's harassment properly, for coffee or dinner, or whatever constitutes a normal human interaction between two people who met under abnormal circumstances. Aria's heart stuttered.
Are you asking me on a date? I'm asking to spend time with you in a context that doesn't involve public humiliation or criminal retaliation.
Luca paused. Though if you'd prefer to categorize that as a date, I won't object. She should say no. Everything about Luca Vitale screamed complication, from his obvious wealth to the casual way he'd threatened Sebastian's family business, to the intensity in his eyes that suggested depths she wasn't equipped to navigate. But her bank account was approaching zero. Her sister needed medications Arya couldn't afford, and something about Luca's voice made her feel less alone in a city designed to isolate and overwhelm. Coffee, Arya agreed. Tomorrow afternoon, somewhere public and well-lit with easy exits. Luca laughed, genuine amusement warming his tone. You sound like you're planning an escape route. I'm keeping my options open. Smart. He rattled off an address in a neighborhood area actually recognized, a coffee shop near the community college where she took night classes. I'll see you at 3. And Arya, wear something comfortable. I promise no ballrooms, no wine, and absolutely no entitled billionaire sons. He hung up before she could respond, leaving Arya holding her phone and wondering what she'd just agreed to. The next afternoon found her sitting across from Luca in a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and undergraduate stress. He'd arrived early, claimed a corner table with good sightlines to all exits, and was currently butchering a crossword puzzle with endearing incompetence. 12 across is wrong, Arya said by way of greeting, sliding into the seat across from him. Luca looked up, and his expression transformed from concentration to pleasure in a way that made her stomach flip. I was hoping you'd arrive early enough to witness my intellectual limitations. Nothing builds trust like mutual vulnerability. 6-letter word for deception is deceit, not denied. In my defense, they both start with D. Luca set aside the puzzle with clear relief. Thank you for coming. I wasn't certain you would. I wasn't certain I would either. Arya studied him in natural lighting, cataloging details she'd missed during their dramatic first meeting. Dark hair slightly too long to be professionally appropriate. Eyes that shifted between gray and blue depending on the light. Hands that moved with deliberate precision, like he calculated every gesture. Coffee? Luca gestured toward the counter. Or tea? Or something horrifically sugary that defeats the purpose of caffeine. Black coffee, no cigar. A woman after my own heart. He stood, moved to the counter with athletic grace, and returned with 2 cups of something that looked thick enough to strip paint. Fair warning, their coffee tastes like they're punishing customers for daring to seek stimulation. Arya sipped cautiously, winced, and nodded. That's definitely punishment. They smiled at each other, the moment stretching into comfortable silence that felt remarkable, given they were essentially strangers. So, Luca said eventually, should we address Sebastian's retaliation, or would you prefer to delay the unpleasant conversation with small talk about weather and mutual interests? Let's get the unpleasant part over with. Arya pulled out her phone, showing him the threatening emails from lawyers representing Hale Industries. They're claiming I violated some non-disclosure agreement by discussing the gala incident publicly, which is bullshit because I haven't told anyone except my sister. Luca read through the emails with an expression that grew progressively darker. This is intimidation, not legal strategy. Sebastian's using his father's lawyers to harass you into silence, probably terrified you'll press charges or sell your story to media outlets. I don't want to sell my story. I just want him to leave me alone so I can work and pay my bills and not worry about being sued into oblivion. Consider it done. Luca typed something into his phone with quick efficiency. By tomorrow morning, Sebastian will receive a counter-threat from attorneys who actually understand defamation law. He'll back off. Just like that? Just like that. Luca set his phone aside, giving Arya his full attention again. I have resources Sebastian lacks, primarily competence and the willingness to follow through on threats. He's a coward who mistakes cruelty for strength. Confronting actual consequences will send him scurrying. Arya wanted to feel relieved, but unease gnawed at her stomach. Why are you helping me? And please don't say it's because you're kind, because kind people don't threaten financial ruin with perfect courtesy. Luca laughed, surprised and genuine. Fair point. Okay, honest answer? I'm helping you because I find you interesting and I'd like to know you better, but that's difficult if you're being harassed into bankruptcy. Call it selfish altruism. Selfish altruism, Arya repeated. That's definitely a contradiction. I contain multitudes. Luca's smile faded into something more serious. But I'm also helping because what Sebastian did was wrong, and I have the power to correct it. That's not kindness. That's just basic decency weaponized through privilege. They talked for 3 hours, conversation flowing with unexpected ease between two people who should have nothing in common. Luca asked about her sister, her classes, her abandoned dreams of journalism. Arya asked about his work, though he deflected with vague references to financial consulting that sounded simultaneously boring and ominous. You're being deliberately mysterious, Arya accused as afternoon light slanted through windows and turned their terrible coffee golden.
I'm being cautious,
Luca corrected.
My work isn't particularly interesting, and I'd rather talk about literally anything else.
Evasion noted. Evasion accepted. He checked his watch, grimaced. I should go. I have a meeting that will bore me into reconsidering my life choices. They stood, the moment stretching awkwardly as both tried to determine proper goodbye protocol for whatever this was. Can I see you again? Luca asked. Same terrible coffee, different day? Arya nodded before her brain could catalog all the reasons this was complicated. Tomorrow, same time. But you're buying, and I'm choosing a better coffee shop. Deal. He left, and Arya remained seated, nursing cold coffee and trying to understand why Luca Vitale's attention felt simultaneously like the best and worst thing to happen to her in years. Over the following weeks, coffee became routine, became ritual, became something Arya couldn't name but refused to examine too closely. They met in cafes across the city, each location Arya's choice, because Luca seemed genuinely interested in seeing her world rather than importing her into his. He was terrible at normal human interaction in ways that charmed, despite their awkwardness. He overpaid for coffee, with the confusion of someone unused to small transactions. He asked questions with anthropological fascination, like Arya's life was a documentary worth studying. He laughed at her jokes with surprised delight, as if humor was a language he was relearning after years of disuse.
Tell me something real,
Luca demanded one afternoon, abandoning his attempt at a cappuccino.
Something you don't tell people you're trying to impress.
Arya considered deflecting, then decided honesty might be interesting. I'm tired, constantly, existentially. I'm tired of working 3 jobs and still being broke. I'm tired of being smart, but not having the luxury to develop that intelligence. I'm tired of being responsible when I just want to be young and stupid, like everyone else my age. Luca absorbed this without flinching. That's remarkably honest. You asked for real. I did. He studied her across their small table, expression unreadable. Can I help? Financially, I mean. Before you refuse out of pride, consider that I have more money than any human needs, and you have more necessity than resources address. No. Arya's response came quick and firm.
Absolutely not. We're friends, maybe. But we're not whatever relationship dynamic involves you solving my financial problems with a checkbook. Friends. Luca tested the word, like it was foreign. I don't have many of those. You have me, theoretically.
If you stop offering to solve my problems with money. Deal, he smiled, something warm and almost vulnerable crossing his face. Though the offer stands if circumstances become desperate. No strings, no expectations. Just practical assistance between friends who met under impractical circumstances. Arya nodded, filing away the offer alongside growing awareness that Luca Vitale was becoming important in ways she couldn't quite afford. A month after their first coffee, Luca invited Arya to his apartment with nervous energy that manifested as rambling explanations. "I thought I'd cook dinner," he announced, then immediately backtracked. "Unless that's too forward. We can order takeout, or go out, or you can leave immediately if this feels like pressure." "You're nervous," Arya observed, delighted by this crack in his usual composure. "I'm terrified." Luca ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful styling. "I like you significantly more than is probably wise, and I'm trying to demonstrate domestic competence despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Cook for me," Arya decided. "I want to witness this alleged incompetence firsthand." His apartment occupied the top floor of a building with a doorman who greeted Luca by name and eyed Arya with barely concealed curiosity. The space itself was beautiful in a sterile way, all clean lines and expensive furniture that looked unused because it probably was. "It's not very personal," Arya observed, noting the absence of photographs or meaningful decoration. "I'm not very personal," Luca countered, leading her toward a kitchen that looked like it existed for architectural photography rather than actual cooking. "Fair warning. I'm about to destroy whatever culinary expectations you're harboring." He proceeded to burn pasta in ways that shouldn't be physically possible, set off the smoke alarm twice, and ultimately create something that resembled food only in the most generous interpretation. Arya laughed until her sides ached, watching Luca curse at boiling water like it had personally betrayed him. "How is this possible? You literally just have to wait for it to cook." "I got distracted," Luca defended, waving a dish towel at the smoke alarm until it finally silenced. "You were telling that story about your professor who thinks proper citations are a moral failing, and I forgot pasta requires supervision. Everything requires supervision. That's the fundamental principle of cooking. That seems like too many rules." Luca stared at the pot of disintegrating pasta with genuine bewilderment. "Why can't food just cooperate?" "Because the universe is chaos and we're all just pretending to have control." Arya moved beside him, peering into the pot. "Okay, this is genuinely impressive. I didn't know pasta could achieve this texture. Is the texture wrong?" "The texture is criminal." Luca burst out laughing, the sound unguarded and genuine in a way that transformed his entire face. "I'm ordering pizza. This experiment has failed spectacularly." They ate pizza on his balcony overlooking the city, 43 stories above the streets where Arya normally existed. The view was stunning, lights spreading in every direction like grounded stars, and Arya felt the dangerous pull of wanting this, wanting him, wanting a life that seemed designed for someone else. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked, watching her expression with that unnerving intensity. "That this is surreal. A month ago, you were a stranger who rescued me from public humiliation. Now, I'm eating pizza on your balcony and trying not to think too hard about what this means." "What do you want it to mean?" Arya turned to face him, finding him closer than she'd realized, his expression open and vulnerable in the dimming light. "I don't know. Something, nothing, everything between those extremes. That's remarkably unhelpful." But Luca smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear with careful gentleness.
Can I kiss you? Or is that too fast? I have no framework for normal relationship progression.
Nothing about us is normal, Arya pointed out, even as her heart raced. True. So is that a yes or a no? Arya answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his with a boldness that surprised them both. Luca responded with careful intensity, one hand cupping her face, while the other found the small of her back, pulling her closer. They kissed like people learning a new language, hesitant then certain then desperate, until Arya pulled back with shaking breath.
Okay,
she said unsteadily.
That happened,
Luca agreed, his voice rough. And I'd very much like it to happen again, frequently, with your continued consent.
Consent enthusiastically given.
Arya rested her forehead against his, breathing him in.
Though we should probably discuss what this is before we get too distracted by chemistry. You want to define our relationship like responsible adults? I want to know if this is casual or serious or somewhere undefined between those categories.
Luca pulled back enough to meet her eyes, his expression stripped of any pretense.
I want serious. I want you in my life in ways that terrify me because I'm not accustomed to wanting things I can't control. But I'll take whatever you're willing to give. Arya's chest tightened with feelings too large for her ribcage. Serious is terrifying. Agreed, but I want it anyway. Then we're equally terrified and equally committed.
Luca kissed her again, softer this time, like sealing a promise.
Fair warning. I'm probably going to be terrible at this. I have limited experience with healthy relationships. Join the club. We meet Tuesdays and Thursdays to discuss our collective emotional damage.
They laughed, and something settled between them, an understanding that this was real and complicated and worth navigating despite the obstacles neither of them had fully acknowledged. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to smash that like button and drop a comment below telling me what you thought about Luca and Arya's journey. And hey, subscribe if you want more stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, because trust me, we've got plenty more where this came from. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.